If you were asked to draw a picture of an old castle, I suppose it would look a bit like Montsalvat. Sitting on a hill at Eltham in Victoria, it seems strangely out of place, a building out of another time. But Montsalvat wasn't built a long time ago. It was put up quite recently as an art school, a place for artists, sculptors and writers to live in, visit or work at, a place where they could talk about their art as well as creating it. Once it was a busy, thriving place. Now it's a place for tourists to visit. But one of the artists who once worked at Montsalvat still lives there. His name is Matcham Skipper.
I spent all my early life working on these buildings, from the excavation to the stonework and the joinery and the ceiling and the wood carving, and we're helping all the other pupils, which were putting in windows and lead light and so on. We worked very hard. We actually worked for 6 days a week, 6.5 days a week, and we had Sunday morning off where we would do our washing and clean up our rooms, and then we'd start again on Sunday afternoon. And we worked a lot of the time just as labourers, but we were labourers with a dream, a sort of vision at the end of it. We visualised a beautiful big hall where we dined, and we had music and dancing and perhaps plays and things like this. And we felt it was worth all the labour. The whole thing was conceived by Justus Jorgensen, whose vision inspired us all, and we had hopes in a new type of world, really, because there'd just been a depression in the city in the 30s, and there were wars everywhere, and everybody was horrified with the rate of modern society, and we wanted some place that we loved and seclusion where we could express ourselves and with the means to sculpt and paint. However, we for a while were self-supporting, and some of us had vegetables and a nursery, and we kept squabs and pigeons and cattle, and it was quite a successful community for many years. It sort of divided up a bit in its later years because some people went off and got married, and some went and had exhibitions in Europe and travelled and so on. Another one went and bought an island up in Queensland and started building for himself. But I feel that we all got a fantastic experience and inspiration from doing this work.
Matcham still lives and works here as a silversmith and sculptor. Matcham Skipper's jewellery is now famous. To have a piece sets you apart from other people. The subjects he chooses are countless. He invents the designs himself, taking ideas from Greek legends or merely making them up as he goes along. Everything in the jewellery, from the sculpting to the actual stones, is chosen and designed by him.
Well, if I find a stone that attracts me, or I've got a client that is attractive and inspires some idea in me, I compose almost the whole thing, or the rough idea of it in my mind, and then get wax and mould it and shape it and let it grow from there. I try not to make it gimmicky or flashy or anything like that, but something that fits in with the personality and the character of the person who's going to buy it. And for instance, this one, and also something that expresses my own moods. This one, unfortunately, is a rather gloomy mood. It's a brooch with Sisyphus, who I think spent quite a time and is probably still rolling a great rock over a hill because he was condemned to this penalty in a Greek legend, and it lends itself rather for a modelling round a stone, or a roughish sort of stone that's just been dug out of the ground.
When Matcham has finished carving in wax, his apprentice takes over. The model is mounted and then put in a flask. Next, special plaster is mixed up. Plaster is poured in until it covers the wax model. Then the bubbles are sucked out by this pump, and the whole mixture is shaken to settle it down. Flask is then put in a furnace. It's heated for about 3 hours. The wax is now burnt out, leaving a hole in the shape of the original carving. Then, silver is placed next to the flask in a crucible and melted. The machine spins and the silver is thrown through a hole into the mould. When it's cool, the mould is broken. Finally, Matcham fits the stone, and last of all, the chain. But where does Matcham get the ideas for all these different designs?
Well, they've all expressed various experiences I've had. This is a simple little one. It's the opals were dark, bluey opals, and naturally I did it in silver because the dark parts of the opal, and I recollected some frogs in a muddy pool that I'd been watching one early morning. This is a gold piece, free form with two lovers woven into the shape, and it was one that I sent, a necklace that I sent to Expo 67. Why it's gold is, I don't know, except that it made me feel that it was all very rich and it needed a lot of expensive metal all thrown around the place. This other one here was a modelling of a mother and child, and it went to Venice to a religious medallion exhibition, and it was just, to me, it was an experiment in very soft modelling with very warm feeling going between the child and the mother. This is an Aboriginal woman in silver, deeply oxidised, which would have been from a woman that I saw in Arnhem Land on a trip up with the Aborigines that I did once. And I've tried to reflect all the various activities and facets that I've experienced.
But Matcham Skipper doesn't just work in miniature.
I remember a story when I first was doing a big screen here for Canberra, and a little old woman came in the door. She had about 20 other people with her, following behind her, and with her husband, Fred, and she came in, and I was in the dark corner here reading a plan, and she said, "Oh, look what he's making out of all this junk, George. He's making sort of pretty screens." And they were looking at them, and he said, "Hey, that's not junk. They're spanners, Maud." He says, "They're spanners and old pokers." And she said, "Oh no, they're not. That's just junk, you know." And then they noticed me in the dark, and she came up and said, "Oh, let's ask him. There's the man who's making them." And she came along and said, what's all this that you're building, welding up here? Are these old spanners?" And I said, I was very distracted because I was up against some problem in the plan and so on. And I said, "Oh, like this." She said, "Oh, he's deaf and dumb." and she said, "Oh, he's a deaf mute. He's George. Fancy him doing all this sort of work." And then they stood there and they became great authorities and they criticised it all. They read it all down. And then one by one all the rest of the old women came in after them, and they showed them, and they pulled it all to pieces and criticised it and said, "You know, I wouldn't have it in my house now, would you?"
These metal designs have been used all over Australia, as gates, as walls, or just as decoration. These wall plaques are at the Church of St Mary Immaculate in Ivanhoe, Victoria. They show the 12 stations of the cross. Already they're famous.
Well, I had a very pleasant experience. One afternoon recently, I came over to this church. I found an Italian priest standing in the middle of the sanctuary, and he was crying out, "Molto bella, molto bella." And he threw his arms around me and embraced me. Well, of course, he wasn't calling me molto bella. It was the church. And then I took him around the stations of the cross, and he was wide-eyed with admiration. And when we came to the 10th station, our Lord stripped of his garments. He stood still, threw out his arms and said, "Magnifico, Magnifico."
Eltham was really a delightful little village once. It had beautiful lot of trees and only a few people around. There was a blacksmith and a hairdresser and a cobbler and a very nice congenial country pub and a beautiful church next to it and a bank. In fact, it was just a little square handmade brick place which I believe was robbed by a chap on horseback who rode off into kangaroo grounds and was never caught. I think he got £5 for his effort. Of course, now it's got a great sprawl, suburban sprawl that's coming all over it, and trees are being chopped down and roads all put in and drive-in bottle shops and self-services, and it's becoming so suburbanised and so overgrown that it's very hard to appreciate its so-called progress. I feel that if it was planned a little better and there was more consideration for the trees and the winding roads, that it could be saved quite a lot. On the other hand, having been here and spent all our lives building these workshops, that we can, putting all our equipment for carving and doing stonework and studios where we can paint and so on, it's very hard to move now. Leaving it and leaving all the work that you've done for so long and be like leaving your kids.